Well, good morning. This is Farmer Fred Detwiler from Pennsylvania, Zone 6. It's a beautiful day here in the end of May, and I hope everyone's garden is doing well and off to a good start. I just want to thank everyone also for your kind words and encouraging words on my first video I did last week. I'm back online, so I really appreciate some of those questions and comments. So today's video is covering a big subject in your garden. How do you get your veggies to grow so big? Plant Nutrition 101. I think that's every gardener's heart's desire, is to have nice, healthy, vibrant growing vegetables in your garden. Your soil quality is determined by three characteristics: your soil composition, your soil pH, and your soil fertility. And today I wanted to focus on your soil fertility. So why do we need to fertilize our vegetable plants? Well, vegetables growing throughout the season, the roots work their way deep into the soil, and so those root systems take up nutrients out of the soil in order to produce the nice sized vegetables. And so by the end of the growing season, most of the nutrients are depleted out of the soil. And so that's why we need to always update our garden soil with proper nutrition. Just as human beings need proper nutrition to live a healthy, vibrant, growing life, so do plants. They need proper nutrition. And so for a successful vegetable garden, healthy soil must contain three adequate amounts of macronutrients in the soil. NPK. The N stands for nitrogen, the P stands for phosphorus, and the K stands for potassium. And so nitrogen is important for healthy green foliage on your plants. And P, which is phosphorus, is important for roots and bloom. And K is for overall healthy plant growth. As many of you know, my wife and I follow a plant-based lifestyle, and one thing I've learned over the years and in the beginning years is that you need to read the labels on the food that you're eating. Most containers, or most food containers, if you read the back, there's labels that teach us what type of foods are contained in the container that we're eating, whether it's saturated fats, sugars, salts. And so my wife and I have learned to really read the food label so that we can live a nice, healthy, vibrant, growing life. And that's what I want to encourage you as a gardener to do, is learn to read the labels on your fertilizer packages. So if you're growing vegetables with the root and fruit, and so what are some examples of that? Well, you have your potatoes, you have your red beets, you have your turnips, sweet potatoes, Yukon potatoes, carrots. They're all vegetables that grow underground. And so those vegetables need more of your phosphorus and potassium. And then you have your leafy greens. If you're growing leafy greens, the leafy greens need more nitrogen. So for instance, if I'm growing some Swiss chard or kale or mustard greens or collard greens out in your garden, right away I should be thinking, well, they're going to need more nitrogen than phosphorus or potassium. So I want to go to the store and read the labels on the bag there, or the container. Ask the person at the store maybe to help you. One of the popular brands in your stores today or garden centers, it's called Espoma Organic Fertilizers. They've been in business for 90 years. Like one of their bags, they have a well-balanced fertilizer of 3-4-6. 3% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, 6% potassium. And so that would be a good fertilizer you could spread over your whole garden because it's a pretty balanced fertilizer. We also have to remember that a lot of the vegetables in your garden are heavy feeders, like your peppers, your tomatoes, your zucchini, your melons. I mean, think about the size of the fruit that these plants have to produce. You know, the watermelons, the melons, the tomatoes, some of your longer zucchinis. So they're heavy feeders. They're going to need a lot of nutrition in order to grow nice and healthy size. Espoma also makes bone meal, which has a profile of 4-12-0. And that's good for bigger blooms and roots. It's something you could use if you're working the soil as you're planting your different root vegetables. Now you can also get these different type of organic fertilizers at some of your garden supply centers or some of your animal feed store supply. They would also probably have some of those in stock. You'd have to just check online or at your local stores. Blood meal is also another product you could use in your vegetable garden. It has a NPK of 12-0-0, and that's really good for lush growth and deep greening in all your leafy greens. And so you could work that into your soil. Also, the good beneficial part of organic fertilizers is that they also are a slow release fertilizer, and they won't typically burn your plants. Another type of fertilizer you could purchase is fish fertilizer. It has an NPK of 5-1-1. And you can see there that it has a high nitrogen number. And so you would be thinking, well, that would be good for leafy greens. And so that's something you could apply to the soil of your garden. You could also use that to foliar feed since it's a liquid. Also, a fertilizer that I use in the beginning of the season, it's called Jack's All-Purpose Fertilizer. Now, I buy a lot of my plants from Ray's greenhouse over there in Telford. And that's something that he recommended for me to do years ago. That's something he uses in his greenhouse while the plants are small. And it has an all-purpose balanced fertilizer that I use of 20-20-20. And so I use that early in the season. After I put my transplants in the soil and they're a couple inches tall, I use that type of fertilizer because it's foliar feeding. It's a quick-acting fertilizer. And so when your plants are small in the garden and it's early in the season, your soil temperature is normally in the 50s or 60s. It's not real warm, and so there's a point where your soil microorganisms are not really active in the soil, and yet those little plants need some nutrients in order to get their proper root system developed. And so that's something that I use maybe for the first month of the plant until those root systems start to grow a little wider and deeper into the soil, and they start to become more vibrant in their growth. I also use alfalfa pellets in my vegetable garden. That's something I've been using in my garden soil for years. It's a wonderful slow release fertilizer. It has an NPK of 2-1-2, so it's pretty balanced for your plants, but it also adds nice organic matter to your garden. I've also used soy meal in the past. It has an NPK of 7-1-2. And so that's high in nitrogen, you can see, so it would be really good for what? For your leafy greens, for your Swiss chard, for your kale, for your collard greens, again, for your leafy greens. I also buy a lot of my fertilizer from a local feed store. So you may be thinking, when should I apply these fertilizers? Well, here in my garden in Pennsylvania Zone 6, as soon as the soil can be worked, I go through with my garden fork and just loosen up the soil. I grow all my vegetables in my composted leaf mulch that's amended with topsoil. I get that locally from Barnside Compost. I get about 5 yards a year from them, and I apply about a 2 to 3 inch layer fresh over all my garden beds. And so once I apply that leaf mulch to my garden beds, I then just sprinkle all over the soil some of my alfalfa pellets. I let that and work it a little bit into the soil, let that break down. And so that way there's a nice level of nutrients all through the garden beds. And then once I do plant my baby transplants, like I just planted some of my tomatoes and my peppers, my zucchini, again, they were only a couple inches tall. Then I gave them a feeding of my Jack's all-purpose fertilizer, the 20-20-20. And you want to make sure you read the directions on this fertilizer, but I think I add about a half a tablespoon per gallon, and then I just, on a weekly basis, maybe every Saturday, every Sunday, as long as it's a weekly basis, I just give each one of those little plants a nice little drink of that fertilizer. It's just, and it's a foliar feeding, so it's going to absorb into that plant a lot quicker, and it's just going to give some proper nutrition for those small plants until they start to grow into maturity. And as your plants start to grow and mature in your garden, maybe a couple months in, you could add a cup or two of the alfalfa pellets around each plant and work that into your soil, because as those plants begin to flower and bloom and produce their fruit, they're going to need another helping of some nutrients in order to produce that nice large fruit. And to sum everything up, you just want to really focus on your soil fertility, your plant nutrition, your soil nutrition. Again, just as we humans need proper nutrition to live a healthy, vibrant life, our plants also need the same thing. And so that's something you really want to be mindful of in the beginning of your garden season, and also throughout the growing season. And also take some time to learn how to read those labels on your fertilizer packages. And so I hope this video was able to answer your good question: how do you get your vegetables to grow so big? I just want to thank you for joining me out here on this beautiful day out here in the vegetable garden. Vegetable gardens are so wonderful to have in your backyard, your front yard, your side yard. It's a nice place to retreat to. You know, this world can be really crazy at times, a lot of confusion, a lot of trials and tribulations in our lives, and it's so wonderful to be able to have a vegetable garden that we can go out to and just enjoy being out in nature and just watching these vegetables grow. It's a place of tranquility and peace of mind. And so until next time, happy gardening. Bye for now.